Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Justice and Pieces guest speaker series. Today's guest is Royland Moriah. He is a partner at McGregor Moriah Horick LLP, where he represents clients charged with criminal code and CDSA offenses. He is also involved with the Ontario Association of Black Paralegals. He is on the board there, and it's part of our series here. We're going to collaborate with the Ontario Association of Black Paralegals over the month of February for Black History Month. We have a number of people coming on board talking with all of you. So really looking forward to this collaboration. And thank you so much for starting it off here, Royland. Perhaps maybe you can tell us a bit about yourself, how you got into law, and a little bit more about your practice.
Sure. And the first thing I'll say is that certainly on behalf of myself personally, and on behalf of the Ontario Association of Black Paralegals, I appreciate the invite. As I said to you before we got started, all I can hope is that I'll at least be interesting enough to make people want to continue listening to what I have to say. But I appreciate having an opportunity to speak. It's always great, not necessarily to talk about myself, but more just to talk about the practice. I enjoy the work that I do. I'm fortunate enough that, years and years ago when I was a teenager and thought, it would be really cool to be a criminal lawyer. And eventually ended up doing that it actually is pretty cool. It's a lot of fun. And I enjoy it on a daily basis. There are the ups and downs and there are the stresses that are involved with it. But I'm fortunate to be able to do a job that challenges me every day and keeps me on my toes and keeps me interested and also allows me to help people, at a time when, often they don't have anyone else in their corner and they're facing some of the most difficult times in their lives. And, it's a pretty satisfying thing to be able to do that for people. So thanks. And hopefully we'll have a nice little chat and, we'll see where things proceed from here. But in terms of my background, I don't know that I want to add much, to what is already been told in terms of the bio. I'm a proud Guyanese guy. I was born in Guyana and moved to Canada when I was very young. I was 4 years old, actually. So I'm also a very proud Maritimer because I grew up with my family mostly in Nova Scotia, primarily, and a little bit in New Brunswick too. So I try to get back there as much as I can because that's sort of my roots. That's where I grew up. I'm a country boy at heart. And it's hard to believe when I think about, where I grew up and, what I was doing in those teenage years that, in my late 20s, I'd be moving to the largest city in the country and practicing criminal defense work. But here I am, and it's been going strong since 2007, so going on many, many years now, 14 or so. And I've been able to really enjoy myself and make the most of this experience.
Yeah, so you mentioned going back to your teenage years, having this idea of getting into criminal law. So had that ever wavered at any point? And maybe you can also elaborate there on going from, out there in Dalhousie and then making the decision to come out to Toronto and what was involved in that. And again, if that was sort of a process that you were always thinking about, or did it just kind of come organically from opportunities?
Mm-hmm. Well, in terms of getting into criminal defense work, it was something that really for me, I always had an interest in. I always had an interest in the law. And I think it sort of came from a few things. I think to some extent, we all sort of watch those shows and we see them and we think that's interesting, right? That looks like something I'd like to do, right? And you hear it all the time, right? There's something about the law. There's something about even criminal defense work that you'll meet people in all walks of life and they say, you know what, one time I wanted to be a lawyer. I thought about being a lawyer. Maybe it's just because I'm a lawyer that I think I hear that more often, right? But and I don't know what your experience is, but I find I hear that so much. But for me, it was sort of watching those shows. I remember watching shows with my mom, actually, right? Where, we would watch these legal shows and I thought this was interesting. But it was also, growing up, as a Black man, understanding, the power of the law. And I think that when you think about Black History Month, what you think about is the people that came before you. And you think about people, for example, like Thurgood Marshall. You think about people like Justice Corinne Sparks. You think about people like Rocky Jones. And I say that because obviously I'm a Maritimer, so I'm throwing out all the names of all the Scotians because they were pivotal, right? They were really important in terms of my understanding of, the power that the law wields. And for, a marginalized community, the law was an equalizer. You understood how it could put you in a position to shift the balance of power. And you understood how significant that could be. And so I think that part of it was sort of the excitement of it, and part of it was the reality of how important and how powerful it could be, and how it affects everything that we do in the world around us. So there were times I think that I probably wasn't as committed to doing that, going into my early 20s, going through my undergrad. But, I think as I came to the end of my undergrad and I took a couple of years off and did a bit of work, and was thinking about where I was going to go with my life, I came back around to that and thought, what, this is something that I think I'll regret if I don't at least make that effort. And I was fortunate enough going to Dalhousie that, at the time, and they still have it, they have a program, the Indigenous Black and Mi'kmaq program, that actively sought to recruit and to train Black lawyers. It's unfortunate that the history of it, the genesis of it, comes from a very unfortunate scenario. And many people may not know that are outside of the Maritimes, but Donald Marshall was an Indigenous man of Mi'kmaq background. He had been wrongfully accused of murdering a friend who was a Black man, in fact, and he was wrongfully imprisoned for many years. And out of that, there was an inquiry, and as a result of that inquiry, there were recommendations that were made, and one of them was the need to increase diversity in the criminal justice system because of concerns about systemic racism and discrimination. We see a lot of that being talked about now at the federal government level, programs that are being put in place, changes that are being made to the criminal code, for example. But that program, the Indigenous Black and Mi'kmaq program from Dalhousie, was born from that, was born from the concern about racism and discrimination in the criminal justice system, was born from the concern that there needed to be an increase in representation, specifically from people from those groups. And for people that know the history of Nova Scotia, obviously the Indigenous population, as it is across Canada, is a significant cultural motivator in our country. And they are people that have been marginalized, nations that have been marginalized for centuries. And we know that the Black experience in Canada, despite what we might think about the differences between us and the States, has a very dark chapter as well, continues to have issues. So that was a very important program. It continues to be. I can tell you that I've, gone to school and seen some amazing people that I graduated with that have gone on to do some pretty incredible things. So I was fortunate to be part of that program. And in terms of coming to Ontario, I wanted to do criminal defense work. And if you wanted to do it, you wanted to do it in the most exciting place to do it. So, I was also fortunate that at the time I was dating my wife, and she had some family up here, and we decided, hey, you know what, it was time for the change. And I wanted to go somewhere interesting. And you might see in my bio too, I mentioned working at the African Canadian Legal Clinic. So I did actually come up to article there. At that time, I was doing anti-racism and anti-discrimination test case litigation, sort of NAACP style, test case litigation. And so I was really excited to be part of that as well.
Yeah, so you brought it up, going way back in terms of the roots there, but from your own experiences now being a lawyer, being here in the Greater Toronto area with the criminal justice system, what can you share about, have we accomplished sort of those goals there or what's there, what has been done, what's there to be done in terms of the criminal justice system, and your experiences practicing it?
I mean, it's a broad question. I'll be frank with you. If what we're talking about generally is about the reality of racism and discrimination in the criminal justice system, we have a long way to go. As I say to people that sort of have this idea in their mind that, well, you know what, the civil rights movement was, 60, 70 years ago. I mean, we've taken so many strides. Well, there's been racism and discrimination for centuries. So we're just scratching the surface now. We're just starting to turn the tide, or trying to turn that tide. And it's going to take a lot longer for there to be the impacts that we need to be able to see, because for hundreds of years, the odds have been stacked. They have been deliberately stacked. And if we don't recognize that, we can't do the things we need to do to address those inequities. So in terms of the criminal justice system, we know that the criminal justice system in many ways was a foundational means by which the deck was stacked, right? And so we need to recognize that it's not just happenstance that these things are the way they are. In some ways, they were meant to be like that. And so now, how do we fundamentally change a system that was in some ways meant to be oppressive to certain groups, right? And so to do that, it starts with recognizing that there's a problem. And I think that what you see in Canadian jurisprudence, at least, is that there's at least that recognition that there is racism and discrimination in the criminal justice system. So that's not, I don't think that anybody would suggest that that is an issue, that would be something that needs to be argued or something that needs to be established anymore. The question now becomes, how do you deal with that? And there are lots of different ways. Certainly, the first thing in my view is that recognition has to become part of everyday practice. And so, for example, I was meeting as part of myself and another member of a committee for cable, criminal justice committee. We were meeting with a member of parliament on an issue. And one of the things that I had said was that when you're talking about legislation, for example, you want to make sure that the language is mandatory in terms of addressing some of these things, because what it does is that it puts an onus on the system itself to recognize that there's a problem, and it puts an onus on the system to always be thinking about how to address that problem, because it's not enough for us to just say that there's a problem. It's, as collectively as a group, we all have to say, well, what is our role in addressing it? Crown attorneys, when you're exercising your discretion, how do you do that? Judges, when you're listening to evidence from accused persons from racialized communities, are there biases that are affecting how you're doing that? Legislators, are you thinking about how various types of criminal justice policies that you're putting in place might have disproportionate impacts on certain groups? Collectively, as a system, we have to have a means of looking at some of these things. And so, are we making progress? Certainly. I think that what we're seeing now is that there is a greater focus on some of these concerns. But there still needs to be continued progress. You still need to remove all mandatory minimums, because quite frankly, they have a disproportionate impact on certain groups. You need to look at more and the significant bail reforms. You need to consider issues of sentencing. You need to look at the training of judges and crown attorneys and issues of bias, both unconscious and conscious bias. Those are things that we need to continue to do. We need to have more crown attorneys and more judges from racialized groups, because those are the ones that wield a lot of the power, right? It's fine to say we see a lot of criminal lawyers that are from some of these groups, but you need judges that are on the bench. You need crown attorneys that are exercising their discretion, that have experience in those communities. Those are the things that you need to really continue to push that change.
Now, from a practice point of view, you had mentioned, a lot of these shows there, and how much did you learn there in terms of reality versus perception? I think a lot of, even law students have this idea of what it's like to be a criminal lawyer, but then the reality is quite different. Maybe you can share kind of from that experience, especially for those who may be thinking about a career in criminal law, what it's like, in terms of a day-to-day life. I know every day is different if you're in court or not, but what's that like in terms of practice as a defense counsel?
Right. So I guess the first thing I'll say is that if you are going to be doing criminal defense work, you should really like it, because it's a grind, right? It will tear you down. It is exhausting at times, both mentally and emotionally and physically. And I don't say this to scare everyone away. I know everybody's thinking like you're doing a terrible job of selling it right now. But the reality is that it's a very difficult job. It really is. And it's also a difficult job that I'll tell people that come out and law students that actually finish up law school or are going into practice. They do their research, so they know this isn't the type of job that you jump out and all of a sudden somebody's handing you bags of money. That's not happening either. Okay, so I think the first thing is that there is a glamour that's associated with being a criminal defense attorney that isn't actually the reality. Okay, I don't finish up a day in court where the witness just admits that they were lying and I drink a scotch and laugh about it with my buddies while we smoke a cigar. It's just not what it is. If anything, I'm finishing up the day. I'm making multiple calls to catch up on other matters when I'm off of my trial, sending emails to get back in touch with people, taking a bit of a break with my family, and then probably getting back to work later on in the day. So there's a lot of work that's involved, and it's a grind. So you have to love it. You got to have a passion for it, because you're dealing with people's lives, right? You're dealing with things that could fundamentally alter their existence going forward. And if you don't have a passion for it, you're not going to be able to deal with those ups and downs. That being said, the one thing I'll say that I always say to people about criminal law is that all the stuff you see on TV on those shows that you're like, wow, that's a crazy story. Believe me, there's all kinds of crazy stories. Like that's just, it's the tip of the iceberg, right? For every crazy story that you might see on TV for some show, I'll do you one better, right? But that's what I love about it. I love the fact that it's interesting. I love the fact that, as I said before, it keeps me on my toes. I think my worst nightmare would be a job where I sat and did the same thing every day. I think I would lose my mind. And it's funny because I remember when I had been taking a couple of years to do some work, and it was in between undergrad and law school, and I had a couple of jobs. I used to work for years at a sports store. I'm a big sneakerhead, so I used to work at Sport Check and Athletes World back in the day in the 90s, early 90s. Actually would have been late 90s when I was an undergrad. I also was working at Stats Canada at the time. It just happened, crazy story, but I ended up getting a job at Stats Canada, in my early 20s, and worked there probably for about 5 or 6 years, just not full time, sort of like permanent part time. And I remember working with some of the older ladies, and when I told them that, because most of the people that worked there with me, they were a lot older than me, right? And I remember telling them, what, I'm thinking about what I'm going to do. I don't know if I want to go to law school. They said, go, don't stay here, right? It's like a warning that they gave me, but it's true. I needed something to stimulate me every day. And that's what I like about this. It does that. It's exciting. It's as fun as I want it to be. I enjoy a good trial. I enjoy cross-examination, but it's hard work. It's stressful work. It can tear you down. So you got to have a passion for it. Otherwise, it'll probably suck the life out of you. Right.
So what are the kinds of things there? And again, certainly over the last couple of years with the pandemic, changed a lot in criminal law and just litigation and court appearances and everything. So what have you noticed in the last couple of years with respect to that? How has that changed? Has it improved there in a lot of ways, or do you miss sort of the in-court experience as well? Or what can you share from that in your last couple of years of practice?
Well, I guess what I'll say is there's the good and the bad, right? I don't think there's the ugly, but there's definitely the good and the bad. And I think, in terms of the good, what the pandemic has forced us to do is to move the judicial system from the 1900s to the 2000s. So we're still about 20 plus years behind, but we're closer, right? We're much more streamlined, I think. I think we have put in place a significant amount of modernization in the system. It's been forced upon us, moving from, paper processes to more electronic processes, allowing more virtual appearances, rethinking the need for certain aspects of the process. So I think that that's been a really important thing that's come out of it from a structural perspective. Okay. From a personal perspective, I think, for myself at least, what's been good about this is that it has forced us to slow down a bit. I think regardless of the work that you've been in, what's happened as a result of the pandemic is that people have been able to take some time to just stop and reflect on where they are in their lives and what's important to them and what they might need to see change. And you see that in people moving to different locations, taking on new careers, all of these things, sometimes forced upon them, sometimes just from the perspective of reflection. And I know that that's been a positive thing for me as well. I've slowed down a bit, whether it's hiring some people, whether it's sort of like looking at my work day, slowing down. It's nice to be able to come downstairs, to my office and, know that before I did that, I was able to help the kids get ready for school, make them breakfast, see them off. Those things are great. Those are sort of the positive things. The negative things, I think, are things that have affected pretty much any business, is that it does make business harder in some ways, right? It has been difficult. I've been fortunate. I have a busy practice. I've been doing this for 14 plus years now. So, at least criminal defense work for 14 plus years. So I'm not in a position where I have to be concerned about getting business. You get to a certain, stage in your career and it's going to come. However, there are differences in how you work that business. So, you have to manage that. You have to be dynamic to those changes. So that has been difficult. But what I'll say is that I think it's probably been more difficult for younger counsel that are starting off, because it's a huge learning curve when you start off, and you really rely on a lot of other people to figure things out, to ask questions to develop relationships. And that's where I think that's where the virtual world and staying at home has been the negative. That's been the thing that's been difficult to deal with, is that people that do at least criminal defense work do it because we like being around people. We like that interaction. We like the social aspect of it. I couldn't do real estate because if I was just sitting and I was just sort of like reviewing documents, or if I was doing something like that, I'd get bored. I need to be engaged with people. And so we've lost a significant amount of that because we are appearing virtually. So that's a difficult thing to deal with in terms of the enjoyment you get out of the work. But importantly, for younger lawyers, they lose that connection, the ability to be able to create those relationships that will help them going forward, mentorship relationships. Those are the things that I think are lost a bit. And so I think as a system, we have to try to be able to balance those things and figure out ways to be able to still recreate some of those experiences, or at least ensure that those can still continue, even in the context of cases perhaps proceeding more virtually.
Any tips for young counsel or students that would be getting into practice with advocacy done remotely? I mean, is it different? I mean, questioning credibility over Zoom versus on the stand in court. I mean, what have you found that you can share with any young counsel or anyone else listening?
Well, I think the first thing is that regardless of whether you have to appear virtually or you have to do so in person, find people that you can speak with and that can give you advice. Find senior counsel, find mentorship situations with people that are hardworking and know what they do and do it well, so that you have somebody's ear to call if you have questions, because regardless of whether you're appearing in person or virtually, you need to have that. It's a big part of being able to manage the learning curve, manage the stress, manage the difficulties of the practice, because we deal with some very complex issues at times, and the law is forever changing. So the one thing I'll say is that whatever your situation is, young counsel, find somebody that you can talk to. Okay. And that, as I said, that applies whether it's virtual or in person. The other thing I'll say is find other things to do outside of the law, right? This work can be all consuming. My wife knows I could be downstairs and I'll joke with her that I'll come up at 7 o'clock and say traffic was bad. But at least she understands now when I tell her, like, yeah, I'm leaving the office, I'll be right up. And then an hour later, I'm still here sending emails or making calls. But you have to be able to, at some point in time, separate it. And I think there's two things. It's part of it is finding something else outside of law to do. And it's interesting. I mean, I have colleagues that do like mixed martial arts, some that do painting, some that are into, weightlifting, some that all kinds of things, right? But it's important to have a passion outside of it, because otherwise all of your energy is just being given to other people to help solve their problems, as opposed to having time for yourself. And connected, to that is just, recognizing, aside from having the mentorship and being able to take time, is, it's okay to be able to just take time away too, right? Because there's one thing about having a passion outside, it's another thing to take time. And when you start off in this business, you feel as if you just got to work, because I got to make my mark, I gotta make money, I got to pay my bills, and that's fine. Obviously you have to do that, but take some time. You need to recharge. You need to be able to do something that allows you to be able to keep that passion going. And I know I get to certain points in times and I think I need to step back for a bit. I just need a bit of a break because I'm worn down, I'm tired, I'm irritable, and I need to sort of step back from that. Otherwise, if you can, do your best to try to develop some relationships, even virtually, with the people that are in the system, right? Because, I always say to younger counsel, it's not just a matter of, knowing who your judge is. It's a matter of understanding the personality of the judge, understanding the personality of the crowns that you're dealing with, being able to connect with the court staff, who are really important. They're an important part of how this system works. Especially as young counsel, I know that if I had a question, I could go and ask them. They would know. They'd be able to tell me, this is where you go. This is what you do. Here's what you need. And being able to develop those relationships is really important as well. But, it's difficult, right?
Yeah, I know it's important there that you brought up taking care of your mental health, and certainly one of the things we've talked with quite a lot of people here on are the different ways and strategies. And you mentioned some hobbies other people have. I know for you, you like to be out on the urban trails there, and I'm sure the Raptors there. I think they've had a good run recently. So anything else that you can share with students in terms of, or young practitioners, about finding things there to recharge, especially with in criminal law? I mean, it tends to be, that you don't have that many big law firms where you can sort of say, okay, so and so is going to take on your matter and just have a little break. How do you kind of find that balance, where you get, as you say, getting lost in traffic there on the way up the stairs, to say, okay, that's it, I need to go in and watch, the triple overtime game or something,
Yeah.
and that's it, that's priority number one here on a Saturday. What can you share for those in terms of trying to find that work-life balance, but at the same time you want to advance your career? How do you make sure that that doesn't get lost in terms of taking care of your mental health?
I mean, it's interesting because in some respects it's the same thing that we use to try to be successful at work, right? It's discipline, right? So for example, I've tried to practice mindfulness, for example. My discipline with that is not so good. Right? I'd like to say that every day I spend 5 or 10 or 15 minutes taking some time to meditate. I don't, right? It's spotty right now. But you see, the interesting thing is that the very same skills that we use to be successful in our practice professionally, we can be used to be successful personally. And it is discipline, right? We have to be disciplined in our practice to do the work that we need to do to be prepared. We need to be disciplined when it comes to recognizing the need for time for ourselves. And so that's the hard part, is being disciplined about that, because what you'll find, and I know that you know what it's like too, is that this is a job that usually attracts people that are willing to give. The nature of the job is that you go into it understanding that I will take on other people's problems and I will do what I can to help them. I give of myself constantly, give of my time and my energy and my thoughts and my advice, give, right? It's not as if you're getting something back. Yes, you're getting monetary compensation, but physically and emotionally and mentally, you're giving a lot, right? And so what you have to learn to do is have the discipline to say when it's time to say no about giving, right? When it's time to say no about just always being the one that is providing for others, right? And that discipline, as you get further along in your practice, allows you to say, you know what, I need to ensure that I schedule time for myself. I have a number of matters that are coming up. I've got to schedule some things. I have the discipline to say no to scheduling anything this week. I'm sorry, no. Discipline to do that, right? The discipline, which I'm not good at, to say, start off your day with a little bit of meditation if that's what's going to work for you. For me, I like to go to the gym and work out and lift weights. Have the discipline to do that because those are the things that help you, right? So I think that the biggest thing really is it's a different type of discipline that you need, right? To be able to protect yourself mentally. And also, which is really difficult for us. You know, I mean, it's unfortunate. You saw the young lady, and I apologize, I forget her name now, who was a former Miss USA. Then she was an attorney and apparently just committed suicide, right? And, you know, it's an example of how difficult this job can be and how much it can take from you and grind you down. And we do need to have the discipline to be able to think about ourselves. And sometimes we feel as if we can't do that. We feel as if we can't sort of show that we have vulnerabilities because somehow that's going to take away from our professionalism, right? But what I like to see, and I've certainly been involved in a lot of discussions about that over the past couple of years, I want to see more discussions about that. I want to see more discussions about people talking about how difficult it is to be in this practice, right? How difficult it is to manage and to recognize that it's okay to say that and it's okay to get the help you need because that discipline in doing that is what's going to also help you to be better going forward as well, right? So, and particularly, you know, for people that are from underrepresented groups, from marginalized groups that are working within the system, because there are specific stressors that we have to deal with that make the job even more difficult.
Right, and you also mentioned there before about mentorship and what could you share there with young lawyers or students who they may be wondering, how do I connect or how do I find mentors perhaps like yourself who can share about how to handle some of those stressors or particularly from marginalized or underrepresented communities in practice, right? That it's harder, I guess, and certainly, as you mentioned, there's more defense counsel coming up through those communities, but still, it may make it to relate to someone from the same background, some of those stressors that you have to deal with that maybe other lawyers may not necessarily have to go through.
Mm-hmm. This is where I do my Ontario Association of Black Paralegals plug. but in all seriousness, though, those organizations make a difference, and they make a difference because you are around people that come from the same background as you, that are dealing with the same stresses as you, and so you then have a safe place to discuss those things, a safe place to get advice about those things, because they're really difficult issues that we deal with, right? On a daily basis, those microaggressions, those situations where you think, well, was it like I wasn't professional, or was it because I'm Black, or was it something else? Maybe it's just in my head, I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Those sorts of things that you can go and say, for example, you join sort of a regular law association. Sure, within that, you're going to find people that have the same background and experiences as you. but it's not the same as getting a membership to an organization that specifically is put in place to address concerns that your community might have, right? So if you're talking about, the Ontario Association of Black Paralegals, you're talking about, the Canadian Association of Black Lawyers, you have to join organizations. Generally, for mentorship, to me, that is the best way to go. If you're coming into a community or coming into a profession and you don't have the background in your family, you don't have the connections from where you went to school, that is the best way to get them, because right away it's a ready-made mentorship situation. So even if you just go to the Ontario Association of Paralegals, right? The point is that what you have is you have those organizations that have people that already have experience, that have already gone through those things. And oftentimes they will have mentorship programs that are set up that are ready made for you to just take advantage of. And that's what you want, right? To be able to build those relationships, to be able to get the advice you need, so that you can help to deal with the stresses of the practice. So for example, I'm a member of the Criminal Lawyers Association. I think it's very important, right? Because we have a listserv, we have various events, we have, professional development seminars, you got, women in the law. There are lots of things like that that allow you to have opportunities for mentorship. And that's what you want to try to do. Be around other people within the profession, because the other thing is this: it doesn't mean that just because somebody looks like you, they're going to be the best mentor for you, right? Just to be clear, that's not the case. It's not always the case. It's very much about personality. Sure, it helps that you have somebody that can speak to some of the specific realities of your experience, but it doesn't mean that somebody that doesn't look like you can't be an excellent mentor for you. And that ultimately, that's what you're trying to find, that mesh of personalities that will allow you to be successful.
And certainly you can have many mentors, right? If you're in a criminal law mentor, you can have people from, the Ontario Association of Black Paralegals, other
Yes.
avenues, right? I mean, it doesn't mean that you have this one person that's the sort of guardian angel type of
Yeah.
person there to have, right? But perhaps maybe you could tell us a bit more. You mentioned mentorship. I know at the Ontario Association of Black Paralegals, kind of where the genesis came. I know it just recently celebrated an anniversary there. And what have you been up to? What's your role in it? And what are some ways paralegals can get involved and gain from the organization, as well as lawyers too?
Oh, absolutely. So as indicated in my bio, I'm one of the board members of the Ontario Association of Black Paralegals. It was founded essentially by my sister, Deborah, who is a paralegal. And she really had a vision for an organization that would support and mentor Black paralegals to put them in a position to be successful in what's a very difficult profession. And so really that is the focus, right? The real significant focus is giving Black paralegals the tools to be successful within the profession, and recognizing that those tools, there are a multitude of tools that will assist them in doing that. So, certainly mentorship is going to be a significant aspect of that. Certainly ensuring that there is professional development that speaks to some of the issues that members of our community are going to have to deal with within the profession. Those are the sorts of areas that are our focus. The past year has been primarily about professional development seminars and really about speaking to what the Black experience has been in the paralegal profession, understanding that a bit more, understanding what membership might need. And that's one of the things that we're going to continue to do in the year going forward as we start to accept membership. So that's really opening up now. We've put everything in place for that to happen at the end of this month. Just last week, we had a strategy session, a focus group, where we discussed some of the things that would be important for membership going forward as we start to prepare more CPD programming for the coming year. So it's really about education, and it's about mentorship, and it's about support. Those are the things that we really want to focus on, so that we put Black paralegals in a position to be successful. So, you know, I'm fortunate. I mean, it's a really strong board of some pretty amazing women that are on it, that are working really hard. And, you know, I'm excited to see where the organization goes over the next little while, and the partnerships that we'll put in place, and, you know, the work that we can do to put members in a position to be successful, because that's what we want to see. What we want to see is successful members, right, that help to strengthen the paralegal profession generally, regardless of race or color or creed. That's what we want to see.
Yeah, and certainly it's been a lot of success thus far. I know there's an event coming up with the Law Society. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about that next Thursday. I think the 10th of February.
Right. And so that's a very recent programming thing that we're going to be involved with. And we're going to partner with the Law Society. Canadian Association of Black Lawyers is going to be involved. And it's just one of the events that they're going to be putting on as part of their Black History Month celebration. So, you know, it's certainly exciting for us. We've been fortunate that we have been able to partner with the Law Society at least once before. We were fortunate to have the treasurer, Teresa Donnelly, speak at one of our events last year. And we're very happy to see that the Law Society recognizes the importance of diversity, the importance of representation. It's going to be important, though, and I think that anybody will say this, that we ensure, you know, as you probably might have seen from our Twitter and our Instagram feed that was posted just today, is that it's about February and beyond, right? So, and the importance of that message, I think, speaks for itself, which is that this isn't just about, you know, having these discussions when there are particularly triggering political events that are going on around the world that forces people to have these discussions, or when we get to Black History Month, but that this should be the way that we think about these things, that inclusion is important, that representation is important, and that all of those things strengthen the profession. The legal profession generally is strengthened by perspectives and ideas that allow us to move forward and allow us to think about how the law impacts not just those that perhaps initially were in power and had control significantly of the law, but everyone that's impacted by the law.
Yeah, I mean, on that point, you know, with Black History Month and looking at beyond, I mean, what as much you know, for you personally in terms of looking at, you know, you mentioned some of, you know, the people that came before you there, you know, from Nova Scotia there. Now, I mean, going beyond, what sort of the next step there to the future generations? Right now, you're kind of bridging that gap, right, from past to present to future. What about that important piece, right, about looking forward and celebrating, you know, the future successes as well? What more can be done?
Well, I mean, I think that what we'll see is that as we continue to have organizations like the Ontario Association of Black Paralegals, we have CABLE, we have all of these organizations that are focused, in my view, always have been focused not only on celebrating what's happened in terms of the history of the past, but also in saying, what are we going to do to build on that so that we can ensure that future generations can not only share the success, but build on that success and create even greater things. And so I think that what everyone wants to do, certainly with the OABP, is to try to continue to build up a membership with a skill level and expertise that allows them to be excellent advocates, that allows them to make a mark on the profession, and that allows them to become part of that change, right? To empower them to be part of that change. And that's what we want to see. We want everyone to be able to feel as if they can be empowered to be part of that change, and to feel that they belong, right? I mean, it seems that it's kind of a crazy thing to say in 2022, but listen, imposter syndrome is real in our business and in our community. And you know, we still struggle with this idea of belonging at times. All of us at some points in time in our career do, and we question whether, this was the place for us or this is the place for us. So we want to try to dispel that as much as possible. And, empowering people to be representative of the community and be excellent advocates is the way to do that. And hopefully that's what some of these organizations can continue to do.
Perfect. So, Roland, thank you so much for taking the time here and joining us and sharing from your experience and sharing the great work of the Ontario Association of Black Paralegals. And I know later this month, we're going to hear from a lot more people on the board. And I think at the end of the month, we're going to hear from all of you collectively. So I think it's great. And we can look back there again, February and forever. Any final words of advice to those looking to get into the profession? Any students listening, particular from the Black community there? I mean, to kind of add to everything that you said. Any final words to wrap everything up? And once again, thanks for taking the time and joining us here today.
So, I mean, I think that the only final word that I would have is that you belong. Right? I think that that's really it. I think what's important for our community and for many underrepresented communities, the understanding that they belong. The law is not to be held and controlled by a select few. It is to be experienced. It is to be applied. It is to be wielded by all. And so do not ever question or doubt the fact that you belong. If this is a profession, if this is an area that you want to become involved with, reach out to organizations. A lot of organizations, for example, have student memberships. It's a great way to start. They tend to be very cheap, the memberships, and they give you easy access to professionals that will allow you to navigate the process of getting into the profession of your choice. You belong. Don't be afraid to reach out to people that are in the profession. Most everyone is more than willing to answer questions, to give advice, to help to support people that are looking to take the next step in their career. So that's the one thing I'll say is don't doubt that you belong. You absolutely do. If you've thought about it, pursue it with passion. Understand it's going to be hard work. Understand you need to take care of yourself too, but you absolutely belong. But other than that, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. It certainly was a joy speaking with you. It's first time being on, and I've watched some of your podcasts. I guess I call them podcasts, but I guess it'd be like the different times that you've had people on, and I think it's really an important thing that you do, bringing all these different diverse voices, in the profession to speak about their experiences.
Perfect. Thanks for that. And I think like you had said, it's good to hear from diverse voices. And I think to echo that message of you belong, I mean, when you see more and more people and you say, well, they belong, so I belong, right? I mean, it helps to kind of give you that support, because sometimes you may not feel that you belong because of what you're hearing, what you're seeing, especially all the things that are going along around at this time right now. So thanks again, Royland, for taking the time and joining us. And again, for anyone listening who wants to be a part of the Ontario Association of Black Paralegals, I believe the website is oabp.org, and we'll share the links as well. And again, later throughout the month here, we'll have many other people to celebrate the organization and all the things that they can do. And again, learning all these great stories from people like Royland to know that there are so many different paths and there are so many ways that you can achieve success in the legal profession. So thanks again, Royland, and all the best, and take care, everyone that's listening.
Take care.